Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the November 5th, 2018 Board of Selectmen meeting. Before we get started, if we could all rise for our invocation and our Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Father God, creator of all, we come before you as your servants and the elected servants of the people. We thank you for the many blessings you have bestowed upon us and our community. God, we acknowledge your presence and humbly ask you to guide our thoughts, actions, and decisions. We ask for an extra measure of wisdom, discernment, and understanding as we attend to the affairs of our community. We thank you, and for those that have prayed today, we pray to you in the manner we are each taught, just as I've been taught to pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I want to welcome everybody who's in the audience tonight, again, along with everybody at home. As always, we will always try to clear the room first and foremost. So we do have on our agenda an informal discussion with SQF LLC regarding the installation of a small cell technology equipment tower in the middle of town. So gentlemen, why don't you come up if you would, introduce yourself, and we can get the discussion going. Okay. How you doing?
Hi. My name is Tim Schneider. I'm the general counsel with Tilson Technology Management, and I guess I'm here at the request of Mike Farrell to talk a little bit about what was billed as an informal discussion about 5G and 4G facilities, wireless communications facilities. I think this was, I assume this is prompted by our application on October 23rd to place a pole in the towns right away. So
I'm assuming, unless you have any other business in town.
Not okay. Just a casual. So SQF LLC is a wholly owned subsidiary of Tilson. So Tilson designs, builds, and engineers information infrastructure. Most of our business is fiber optic and wireless networks. So in that, on the wireless side, either large macro towers or small cells, which is what we're talking about here. So Selectman Bonavita, your mention of a tower in the middle of town, that is not what we are building in the middle of town. It's just small cells are just normal utility poles. So they're little antennas mounted on wooden utility poles in this case. I think in our application we provided a picture of what this looks like.
It seemed like a pretty good tower, or pole and tower to me.
Yeah, so they're just the normal.
I mean, it's not tower.
Yeah, and that's
a huge pole. I mean, it's recognizable.
That's the distinction. The distinction I'm drawing here is when people say
picture that
cell tower.
Do you have that so I can pass it around?
Yeah, we each have one in our package.
Oh, is there a picture in here?
Yeah,
like I said.
It's really.
Oh, all right, my bad, Mike. I guess we already have it.
Yeah, not a good picture.
Oh, it's not a good picture. If you have a better picture, that would be great. I'm sorry, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, so maybe I can talk a little bit. I'm really grateful for this meeting because our preferred approach to this is to be more collaborative. This is not an oppositional process. Ideally, we can talk about. I think the problem we're trying to solve is one that usually communities are also interested in solving, which is improving coverage and service in their communities. And we find, based on our experience, we're doing this all over the country. We're based in Portland, Maine, but we're doing this all over the country, and we find that a collaborative approach is a lot better way to get things done than kind of coming in and butting heads. So appreciate having this meeting. We've been in communications with folks since June, and hopefully this is the start of a productive conversation going forward. Yeah. So maybe I can give you a little bit of background. I mean, I can tell a little bit about how we kind of got to this place that this is a lot of what we're doing all over the country now, and it's a relatively new phenomenon. So most people, at least what I found when we're talking about it, most people are like, oh, that's what's happening. So if I can give you that background, if that would be helpful, that would sort of position what we're doing here. So in the evolution of wireless telecommunications, the cell phone business, right? The first generation was people got cell phone licenses and they put up towers. And the goal was that if they didn't have a tower somewhere and have coverage, they would lose their license. And so that's your first generation towers that you've seen, the rickety cell phone towers that went up all around the country. And there have been subsequent iterations of that process. So if that was 1G, 2G, 3G, now we're into 4G, and there's talk of 5G coming. And each of those previous iterations up until very recently was about a technology upgrade. So getting from analog to digital, and then to provide higher speed service that would enable more data to move over that. And 4G is the technology. Most of us on our phones now have 4G that enables the kind of data usage you're accustomed to, streaming video and email and all the different, and web browsing that you're accustomed to seeing on your phone. But that's a relatively recent change. That first story was about coverage, sort of the "can you hear me now" story, like getting to a place where you could get your bars. But most people have, at this point, experienced, probably first at a concert venue or a sporting event, you have 5 bars, or you have pretty good coverage, but your phone won't do anything, right? I'm seeing some nods. Some people have experienced that maybe before. So that's a problem not of coverage, you have your 5 bars, but a problem of capacity. So in that scenario, many users, probably, those millennials, streaming video, Snapchat, they're using heavy amounts of data on networks that really weren't originally designed to move that much data, or at least they were designed to provide some people data, but really didn't anticipate the level of usage that customers are expecting now from their wireless carrier. And so the wireless companies have pretty granular data about where their network is in trouble and where the users are who are using it most deeply. And so the way that they've solved this problem now is not by building new monopole towers, 150-foot towers. That's challenging anywhere in the country now, and it doesn't really solve this particular problem, which tends to be really tightly locational. A lot of people clustered in one spot using, like the high usage area, like, so not surprisingly, where we're proposing to put this pole here. That is a place where there's a lot of users and a lot of data usage, right? And so the way they solve this problem is not by building another monopole, but by putting a small antenna, usually located on a utility pole top. And so that's the picture that we provided. That's the sort of standard image. And what that does is 2 things. So first, in that area, they'll put a little antenna and they'll plug some fiber optic cable right into the back of it, and bring that fiber back and connect it to the rest of their network. And so for the people who are immediately around where that small antenna is, they experience better service because they're right next to an antenna and it's got a big fat fiber pipe on the back end of it. And for people who are served by that much larger tower that's sort of that covered that area previously, those folks we pulled all those customers who were right near that little antenna off the tower, so it improved service at the macro tower as well. So this is happening all over the country. They're doing infill to solve what are capacity needs around the country. And so you're seeing installations like this first in downtowns, so the places where people tend to congregate most. That tends to be where you see them now, either on buildings or on utility pole tops. And so the preference is to site them on existing utility poles, but where that's not possible, you can use a dedicated single-purpose pole for that purpose as well. So we are here on behalf. We're here on behalf of AT&T. This would be an AT&T pole, at least initially. That'd be the initial tenant. They've identified this location as needing reinforcement. As I said before, their RF engineers are looking at their network, seeing where the holes are, seeing where they need more capacity, and then if we're able to site an antenna here, the idea is that this will improve service and coverage in that area. That's good for consumers. Plus, it meets the carrier has a regulatory obligation to provide high quality service throughout their service territory. So if they have a place in their footprint where they're not doing it, they're not using their spectrum consistent with their regulatory obligations. But also it's a public safety benefit, right? So this means fewer drop calls. About 70% of 911 calls right now come from a mobile phone. So the idea is that it should provide those benefits in the places that are immediately served by the pole. So that's a sort of general technology background. I can talk a little bit about this specific situation, but maybe I can stop there and answer questions because I saw some skeptical or confused looks. I could probably answer questions. I answered all.
I had
Did
one.
you want to say something? I don't. But, you know, who else question? Garrett? you wanna
Well,
start?
I had one when you mentioned poles versus putting them on buildings,
Yeah.
okay? And you gave us many, well, Maureen Hopkins gave us
Yeah.
many pages of stuff. And some of it reads, well, I guess it's lawyer talk, but when I read it, it's sort of threatening, you know? But, so what I want to go with is, you mentioned poles versus private buildings, and I want to try to get to it. Are you here because if you get something on a right-of-way, like Georgetown has, I think as a town, as I read this, we cannot perhaps get the funds that a private building would get. If you wanted to lease this on a private building, you're now dealing with the owner of that property and that. Where if you get it on a right-of-way, I can't turn specifically to where it is, but we have to be in a more,
You're looking at the FCC order.
yeah, and we have to, we have to keep things competitive. Yeah, I think there's language in here to the fact that we can't get any more than sort of like other contracts that we've handled. Or maybe Mike's going to answer this question for me. But I kind of read it as, we're not supposed to get much more than what it's going to cost us to provide this.
Well, I'll let Mr. Schneider answer that, but I think that the FCC's capped the revenue stream.
But that's for government,
Yeah.
not for private.
I don't know, I can't.
Like,
speak to that.
that's what I'm trying to get the point at. So I think they're trying to go more with government right away in towns and that, because it's a big savings for the companies. Versus if they had to put it on, let's say they went to a large building down in that square and said, we want to put one on each corner of yours and reach them. They'd probably say, well, if we can get the permitting and you're willing to pay us what we want, you can do it. So that's what I'm saying. Can you give am I correct in that assumption, perhaps?
Well, maybe I can start at the beginning.
Well,
of your
I mean,
comments.
I asked the
So
question, poles, putting it on a pole on a right-of-way versus if you were to put it in our square on someone's private facility, a landowner, would the cost be probably a lot more to your company?
It generally is more expensive to try and site a wireless facility on private property, yeah.
Okay.
But it's also generally not as advantageous from sort of an RF where you can get the signal perspective, because you're on a building and you have to deal with the effect of the building versus a utility pole where it's right there. I apologize if our initial letter came off as threatening. That certainly was not the intent. Really what we found is that this is relatively new for a lot of towns. You know, some major cities have been dealing with this for a year, like New York, Philadelphia. You know, they have a book for this. But we found it pretty helpful generally for folks to understand what the legal framework is that governs their actions, because most people haven't dealt with a small cell before. And this in particular, like, this is relatively new. This came out within a few days of when we were filing it. So it was not intended to be threatening. It was just like, this is the governing law, and that's our understanding, and hopefully that was helpful. I hope it didn't come off as
I
threatening.
want you to know, I'm very open to increasing the service to Georgetown. I want you to know that.
Oh yeah. Well,
We've got I see that as well, that's something that we've got to discuss going forward as a board. Well, and you're the first ones here knocking on the door, and I also commend you for that. But the way the packet kind of reads, it is a little threatening.
well, that was definitely not the intent. So I apologize if it came off that way.
What's that, Gary?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Right, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, to that question, would you guys be open to any other areas in town that are owned by the town, like town-owned land, as opposed to public ways? Why in that specific area?
So that specific location, the way this works is the the RF engineers of the wireless company say, here are the spots that would be good candidates that would solve the problem we're trying to solve by adding an additional antenna. And my understanding is that's the best spot for it, given where the need is. There may be other spots if there's a particular problem with that one. I might be open to that conversation, but I don't know. I'm not the person who knows, like, oh, here are the other spots in town that might be good candidates.
I get you, okay. And then on the question about putting it on private land as opposed to a public way, so where I see this right now, it's probably, what, 10 feet away from the Davis building, right? So what's that 10 feet? I know you said if you have to attach it to a private building, you have to deal with other issues. You're almost on top of that building as it is right now. So what are some of the complexities if you had to move it that 10 feet onto a private lot?
So, and Larry Morgan, who does site acquisition here, he's the job who's, if we can't find a spot in the right of way, he often will have to find a private building. He can describe some of the complexity that comes with it.
Right.
Should have called him up at the beginning.
No, I never know where to sit. I'm Larry Morgan. I do site acquisition for Tilson. And to answer that question, the utility pole allows 360 degree of coverage. Where if you're flat on a building, then you don't get that. The coverage that you get is diminished. So the ideal position, even though it is only 10 feet from the building, would be on that utility pole, because it achieves their objective to get as much capacity as they can.
Are we talking about attaching it to the side of a building or to the roof
Well,
of a building? Because if you attach it to a roof, you have 360, right?
But
Either way.
you can't go down, right? So it doesn't go, you have a building right underneath you. So that affects
Well,
the
you do
property.
here. You have a building that's 10 feet away from you that's underneath the pole.
Right, but the antenna needs to go, it's looking to get people who are sort of looking up the street. So you see that location, it gives
can be
good
too
visibility to those locations. But so,
Just
but the other issue that adds a lot of complexity to this is that negotiating power and fiber and all the negotiations I have to get to the roof of that building is an order of magnitude more complex to get into and access to a building than it is in a utility pole, where you can string fiber right there, you can bring power right there. That's relatively straightforward. And so from an operational perspective, from a maintenance perspective, once you move off a utility pole into private property, it gets significantly more complex from a equipment management perspective.
Yeah, okay. I think just one more comment. Aesthetically, it just doesn't fit the character of the downtown. It's not very attractive, and you got a bunch of wires too. It's not just the pole, right? You have to extend wires to connect somewhere, and where are those going? So I can see on the image you have a pole, and then there's two wires that are connected to that. Are those going down Main Street? Are those connecting in the ground? How are those?
Yeah, I think it'd be great if we could step back for a second and if you could just explain to us what the proposal actually is. Are you erecting this pole, or are you just attaching this to an existing pole?
So AT&T attempted to work with the municipal light department to put stuff on existing poles, and the message, I think this is consistent with the light plant's rights under state law, decided not to allow any attachments to existing poles in Georgetown. And so that's sort of how we got brought into this. Our I guess you call it CLEX here in Massachusetts. You can go an hour north, it's a CLEC, I don't know. But SQF has the right to place utility poles in the right of way as a Massachusetts utility, and so they came to us seeing that there wasn't an alternative option on the existing poles, some of which are right across the street, although there are obviously, I think there's some three-phase across the street. It's a little more complicated than that. But there are existing utility poles in town. They're just not available to AT&T, so that's why they turned to Tilson and SQF.
So Attorney Schneider, I've heard you say now a couple of times, it seems like you're going down a road of legality, right? You have a right to do this. law says this, whatever. So I'd like to get comments from our council, if you could. Attorney Ackman, what is your response to, some of these comments?
I'm going to address the question first, the right. At this point, I don't believe you would find much support for the idea that a wireless facility can be placed in a public way as a matter of right under state law. I don't believe that Chapter 166 provides for that. That has been the argument that's been made. We're pretty certain that that's not correct. However, there's an overlay of federal law here that must be considered because telecommunications is covered by federal law. And there's certainly an impetus to strongly encourage municipalities to consider these applications, to provide some guidelines or even tightening the boundaries, how they can be considered from the federal side. So while it's on the state side, I don't believe there's an absolute right. There is certainly federal law that applies that we have to consider here in looking at this application. And that's a complex issue. Maybe not, we don't want to go through all of it at this point in time. We can advise on certain issues as we hit them. But ultimately, the federal government is strongly encouraging, and that's a nice word for what they're doing at this point, that right-of-ways, public right-of-ways, be an area that is open to placement of these facilities where they're needed.
Now, when you say encourage, okay, I think I get the gist of that, but that doesn't mean a municipality has to necessarily agree with placement, timing, anything like that, correct?
Correct. That's one of the areas that's difficult. I mean, we've heard some of the technical testimony here, and that's certainly a consideration. Municipality has place in the statutes that it's allowed, the statute allows municipality to govern and protect the use of its right-of-ways. At the same time, it doesn't allow, that particular provision doesn't allow municipality to simply say no. There has to be some consideration of the reasons for saying it's not safe, or it's not practical, or it's not right here. We would like it here. So that discussion can certainly take place as to what is the proper location, but certainly the technical reasons for the location will have to be considered by the board.
We, I see here we have Town of Georgetown Municipal Light Manager David Schofield's in the audience. David, can you actually come up here for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Not so much here, gentlemen. He's just going to go in the front row. So you can kind of sit there. So, David, what are your thoughts on placement? Does the Light Department have any thoughts about maybe a better location than say right downtown?
I think it's new, and we don't know a lot about it. And this is not our business, and that's the reason for the denial initially. Nobody's trying to stop progress. I mean, I think if your constituents need this in the future, then we're going to find a way to do it and cooperate with everybody. Aside from the legal issues, I think it's an enormously bad idea to put any other structures other than ours in the right-of-way for a variety of reasons. So there's a lot of technical questions. There's a lot that we don't know. We said no on our structures initially. I just think we need to learn more about this and find out. I mean, I don't have any procedures for my guys working on a structure like this with the RF energy up there. I'm not sure about that. That's just the beginning. So, I'm not opposed to this. I think we just need to take a breath.
Okay. Kind
of find out this is my opinion.
Yeah.
Would find out what other communities are doing and kind of maybe take another look at it. We're better informed.
Kip, did you have any questions?
I asked, but I was just curious.
I didn't ask you if you were done, so.
No, that's okay. I just was curious if this, it's a photo simulation, so I just didn't know if he was looking to erected their own structure or if it was an attachment to an existing one.
Okay.
But that question's been answered.
Doug, do you have any questions? or-
Yeah, I do. How tall are the poles you're talking about?
This is a 45-foot pole there.
It would be the same height as the poles that are on the street right
Existing
now.
utility poles?
Correct.
So any of the attachments on it wouldn't be any higher than the existing utility pole?
I think in the aggregate, the height of the installation would be the same height as the poles that you have on that street right now.
So there wouldn't be any attachments to to that pole that would extend higher than the,
That is correct.
is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Now, whenever there's talk of cell towers, there's always talk of RF and RF energy and its potential effects on health. So do you have any information regarding that?
This is very low power. In fact, you could plug the equipment into a 110 outlet and it would work. There's very little RF emissions from this kind of an installation. It's not anywhere near the power or the strength of a macro of a tower site or even a rooftop site. This is a very focused installation, and it's to hit a specific area where there is sector exhaust. And that is identified, as Tim was saying, by the RF engineers, and also it's customer driven, where they get complaints about calls being dropped or calls not being able to be made.
So how far is it? You're only talking about one pole?
That is correct.
So how far that service?
Incredibly, the max is 2,000 feet.
2,000 feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a focused infill of the network.
Pardon me?
It's really a focused infill of the network. There's a problem in this specific area, not surprising, given where the location is. It's solving a problem in that specific spot.
Further in the packet is, now I can't find it, but there's another letter dated October 19th talking about Verizon. You representing Verizon too? It has Tilson on the page.
We are
Talking about adding Verizon equipment?
So we're not at
On
this
top
time.
of
This is
AT&T
just
equipment?
about AT&T, and I'd have to pull up my copy of the letter to look at that.
Yeah, sure, I know.
That one there.
Yeah, do you mind if I grab the copy?
Sure, go ahead and take a look. It says structural analysis.
It's a mistake. Yeah, so that looks like it was prepared by our engineer internally, and we do work for all the carriers, and I think they just, that's a standard letter that says that the analysis, that the pole will hold the equipment that's on there, and I think they had moved from doing work for Verizon to moving work for AT&T and didn't update that. I will say, so this is an AT&T pole, it's for AT&T equipment. I will say that one of the benefits of installing a pole like this is that it's a clean pole. So once it's up, there will be other carriers coming through wanting to put small cells in this location. AT&T will not be the last person who wants to, or last entity that wants to install small cells in your community, and having a clean pole enables other carriers to go on that same pole. That's really part of our ideal approach. And so I was telling a story about 4G. So this is happening on 4G right now, but the expectation is as 5G expansion continues, that's going to require more antennas. They're generally smaller, but more antennas closer to users that'll provide sort of the next generation of speeds, equivalent to gigabit speeds on wireless, over wireless. But that won't be deployed in Georgetown in the immediate future, but this is a problem that communities will need to figure out how to solve, and having dedicated pole space that can be used for other attachments down the road is actually usually beneficial.
Okay, so the packet indicate, one letter said this was about 4G, and then other pages, and it talked about 5G. So is it one, The
Yes.
other or both?
So this is a 4G installation. Some of the references to 5G in that packet have to do with the FCC's order, which I talked to Mr. Fowler about earlier. So that really, the changes to federal law are, the FCC has framed them as being about facilitating wireless expansion for 5G, and that's probably most of the references you've seen to 5G are coming from that order.
Well, I didn't have a real opportunity to read everything, you know, because of the time frame we got this in. But I had, I already asked that one. Apparently, you've already spoken to the Lake Department.
Yeah,
I would,
sorry.
I would ask the town attorney, I think that you already addressed this, but I would just want to make sure. Would the information that Tilson has supplied to us, does that comply with Title 22, Chapter 166, Sections 21 and 22? I mean, are they eligible for that?
You're talking about the state statute for poll hearings.
Right.
It's difficult to say, and the reason is this. The application represents that AT&T is, this is a pole being erected for AT&T, if I understand that correctly. AT&T is, of course, a telephone service provider and would qualify under that statute. They also have wireless entities, and the application doesn't distinguish between the two. So that's one of the difficulties in trying to determine. If, for instance, AT&T wanted to come in and put up a telephone pole and say, and we also want to put wireless on it, that would be a clear application 166 and put up a telephone pole. That's not quite what's being said. So, you know, in my opinion, I earlier indicated that I think the board could utilize the procedures of 166, regardless of whether, as a matter of right, they apply or don't. But I don't think it's clear whether this particular application falls under 166 just because AT&T's role here is not clear.
And then I would ask you, what's your plan B? Because obviously you think Georgetown is primed for this, so what would plan B? Do you have secondary sites identified?
So typically, when a carrier is choosing locations, the RF engineers have a range of sites that provide that there's like, you know, good, better, best. And so the more there may be some other sites. This is obviously the prime site because there's a substantial investment moving ahead trying to site this. So you're going to go for the one that is the one you want.
Sure.
If this one isn't acceptable, there may be other sites, but you know, our preference would be to move ahead with this one or something close to it.
So you're not aware of any that hasn't been made known to you, any of these secondary sites?
Not me personally. I just don't know. I don't know where the ranking is. Yeah.
Could you do site acquisition?
Correct. This is the priority, this location here. This hits the parameters of what they're trying to achieve.
So is there another site identified in Georgetown as a secondary site or a tertiary site?
There is one closer to this building here. Is that Central Street right out here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. At the, right at the intersection of Central where the light is here. But that is a significant distance from the area that's experiencing the sector exhaust. So as Tim says, the focus really is on that intersection by the Davis building. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And once again, it's a very.
You're talking about a little less than a half a mile, right?
Yeah, well, that's a significant distance when it comes to small
You're
cell.
talking about a 2,000 mile
No.
radius, 2,000 foot, sorry,
Yeah.
2,000 foot radius, right?
Correct.
So 2,000 this way, that way, and that way, which is a little less than a half a mile in distance.
Right,
Correct.
but there are other things that happen here, right? So the location matters because there might be buildings or trees or other obstructions in the way that make a site less desirable, or sources of interference between here and there. This is why I'm a lawyer, not an RF engineer. but there, even though the site may be sort of close by, or you can see it from there, there are significant differences between sites for just those reasons.
Okay, and what other communities in the area have you all deployed your technology?
Boy, I can't off the top of my head. I know there have been other installations in Massachusetts. We've done a considerable amount of work outside of New England as far as installations go. New Jersey and New York City, upstate New York. And I know that we are also in the same stage as we are here in Georgetown as in Peabody, Massachusetts.
Yeah, so Mr. Dawes, just to maybe focus your question a little bit more, are you asking where SQF and Tilson in particular are working, or where small cells are being deployed?
Oh, particularly your company.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is have been brought in by AT&T relatively. We just got a contract with them relatively recently to do this work in Massachusetts. Though we've probably been doing small cells all over the country for 4 or 5 years now.
Correct.
Just right now, we've just started doing work in Massachusetts relatively recently.
Are you a Massachusetts corporation?
We're a Maine corporation.
Maine corporation?
So the parent company, Tilson, is a Maine corporation, and SQF is a Maine LLC.
I guess, I'd like to see better service. The issue with these types of deployments, they're not very aesthetically pleasing. No?
There's no pretty way to bring in technology.
Yeah.
Well, that's why you see the other towers are out, other cell towers. They're usually not in the center of the town. They're like, we have one right out in that way.
Got one across the street.
Well, that's in their steeple,
Yeah.
so you can't see it. You're saying that this couldn't go in to something like that.
I'm not saying we couldn't. I mean, this is the proposal right now. Going back, re-engineering it, finding a private location and doing a decorative attachment or putting it in a steeple or something like that restarts this whole process again.
It's expensive.
Well, see, we usually see these towers like on the edges of towns and along the highway. You don't usually see them in the center of a community.
Well, that is correct, and as Tim was mentioning about the growth of the cell phone technology, in the beginning, those cell towers fit the need, and they were able. You'll see those cell towers; they're 2 miles apart. That was pretty much the max of their coverage, but it's not. Coverage isn't the issue right now. It's capacity, because we use our phones for just about everything except for making the call. We email, we take pictures, or we're on social network, and that's what soaks up all the data, and that's what results in that sector exhaust, and that's what AT&T is addressing here.
So
That's all I can think of based on what I was, scanned and read a little bit of.
So you guys keep mentioning that it's more expensive, right, to go to the private side. AT&T is a multi-billion-dollar company. Why should we care that it's going to cost AT&T more money to put a tower somewhere else?
Yeah, so I guess this goes back to how I opened it. This is sort of, we came in, I think we're interested in trying to help. It's a problem for AT&T, and it's a problem for residents in the community. AT&T is a large company with a national footprint, and they're trying to decide where to devote their limited capital resources to try and improve their coverage and their network, and they're going to go to the places where they can build stuff. And so if it's going to be much more expensive here, they'll have to figure out how they allocate those resources internally, whether it makes sense to build it here or to go maybe build 2 sites somewhere else and solve the problem for 2 other communities. I think that's the internal tension that we would have to take back to them. Like we were, the community didn't want to build a pole here, so we'll bring that back to AT&T. There's not a path forward here, depending on how the rest of the process plays out. But I guess it's really.
But I guess from my standpoint, I'd rather not hear you guys say it's more expensive, right? AT&T has plenty of money that they can put it someplace that would be more aesthetically pleasing. You put it in New York City, nobody knows, right? Because there are poles everywhere. right? Put it in New Jersey in the center of somewhere, no one cares. It's there's like you put it in downtown Georgetown, people are gonna realize that.
So I may be mistaken, but there are already utility poles in downtown Georgetown, a bunch of them up and down that
But
street.
we don't need more, is what I'm saying. I mean, at least we would rather not have more.
We hope to have a long-range plan that at some point
Right.
they may not be there.
And Joe, if I can interject here, our focus was not on the cost. It was where is the best location to get that 360-degree coverage that hits the parameters that AT&T is trying to address. Because at that intersection, and it's the traffic you have through here is absolutely off the charts. It's incredible.
But to Gary's point, we also were trying to come up with that economic development plan to kind of ease that a little bit.
Yeah.
And certainly, this utility pole is not going to help, our economic development plan, I guess, when trying to, do something, downtown.
Well,
It sounds like it's people stuck in traffic on
AT&T
the
is
phone. They're using up the data.
AT&T is sensitive about the cosmetics as well, and where this placement is, you do have the building directly behind it, and it is in the tree line as well. So it isn't standing right out in the middle. There are trees along, that's Main Street, correct? Main and Central. So
Let's fix up. Let's fix up. Steve, I know you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, we've heard from our light department that they need to learn more. Technically, we're not in a position technically to make it, a decision. So I personally would have to go with the advice from, from people in town that this is their area and this is, there's concerns about it right now. We need to learn more, so.
I think that this is if you don't, I'm sorry.
No, I'm good, yeah.
This is a preliminary discussion, and I would like to learn more about it. And then I think that we'd be better off as a board if we each learned a little bit more about what you were talking about. And again, right now, of course, the major thing is always going to be aesthetics, unless they find a way to, the actual transmitter's at the top of the pole. The rest of it's just equipment, right?
correct, you'd have a radio cabinet
Right.
about 12 to 15 feet above the ground,
Right.
which,
Well, you're most concerned, well, besides that technical equipment there's that little piece on the
the
top.
circular antenna on the top, that is correct. That's the antenna.
Right.
That's it.
So then when things are deployed, does that mean, because you're only getting 2,000 feet, so what's the next? At the end of 2,000 feet, you get another one there and acts like a repeater and shoots it out?
Well, there might not be an issue at the edge of that 2,000 feet, Mr. Dawes. This area here was identified not only by RF engineer, it's incredible what they can do just sitting at their laptop without going anywhere, all right? They know the holes in their coverages, but also a customer complaint drives this as
Is
well.
this the driver?
That's-
Customer complaint?
It's a big contributor as to what makes them look at particular areas. And that intersection there, there's a history of poor coverage, of weak signal strength. And once again, it took me a while to get my arms around this, but it's not, coverage isn't the issue, it's the capacity. And this installation boosts that signal strength to assure a strong signal at all times.
David, I know you had a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Tim, if, let's say we had no infrastructure downtown and we had a covenant that we weren't gonna have any overhead infrastructure, we were all underground, which is probably something we would like to do if we had the resources in the future. But we really needed to solve this problem. What would the move be? Would it push it right to a structure, or is there another? Well, certainly it can't be down at ground level, so it would need to be on some type of a structure.
Yeah, so generally in communities that have moratoriums on putting any above ground infrastructure, that's a real barrier to small cell deployment, and those two things come into conflict.
Okay, all
And there's
right,
no
thank
sound
you for your
like that.
honesty on that. Because I think with our strategic plan, if it didn't directly say in there, I think it was implied that we were trying to move towards something like that, which is significant, I think, as we did that strategic plan, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? So,
Okay.
So
Are you all set?
I am, yeah, thank you.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, Tim, you mentioned earlier about possibility or probability of co-location, because I know that was a big thing when the old cell towers,
Right.
they were mandated, I believe, to co-locate. What, so AT&T gets their pole in here, what's that pole gonna look like with 3 or 4 other carriers?
So I can provide examples of what a pole might look like. It's tough to describe. You know, once you have power and fiber to the pole, the antennas are relatively small. You saw the picture of the one that's on that.
So there'd be just one cabinet, or?
Depends on how it's configured, and it depends on the technology that's going up. But I can provide some images of what that might look like. But there would be more equipment on the pole. I guess. Just wanted to correct one small thing. So this SQF will own the pole, not AT&T. So AT&T's equipment is on the pole top. Just to,
Okay. So SQF then will receive the revenue from all these other various carriers.
correct. That's the business, right? You
And
own
we
the pole.
only get to charge you one time for the installation. I believe it's capped at $500 maybe per year, or a one-time fee.
Yeah, so I think that's it's in the FCC order that Mr. Fowler referenced. So in some communities they've attempted to use, they have governing statutes that allow them to charge for right-of-way use, or passed ordinances to that effect, and so the FCC order is designed, and the FCC concluded that those ordinances and those charges were a barrier to deployment, and so they've imposed a cap at costs, or at the safe harbor numbers that are in the order. I wasn't aware that, I mean, sort of different when you have a municipal light plant, that you all charge for use of your right of way, or there's a governing ordinance that does that, but.
Well, we don't have one, so we're barred from doing it because now we can't.
I'd have to defer to your attorney on what you're able
I was
to
gonna say, Attorney Hamby, did you have a comment? I know,
Yeah, just, thanks, Mr. Chairman. To Mike's comment, council correctly characterized that fee number in the order as a safe harbor. It's not a cap. So the intent of the order is that municipalities can charge the fee that they actually incur costs for. They can't, it has to be one-to-one. And the FCC said, in order to give you an idea what we think would be reasonable, here is the number. And it's 500, I believe 250 for, I'm not sure how that, but it's a tiered system. That's a safe harbor. Basically, if you're inside of that, it's assumed that your fee is reasonable. If you want to charge more, you will have to justify those costs. And each installation could potentially incur a fee. So each time work is done on a pole, there's a potential for that, because the municipality may incur costs, police details, whatever. So that's part of the situation here. There was another question raised. I've lost it while I was talking about this one. Sorry, I don't know.
whether the town is barred from implementing an ordinance.
No, the town's not barred from fees because you don't have a regulation now. You're not barred from charging fees. Aesthetics is a trickier issue, by the way, and we should at some point have a discussion about that.
Is SQF similarly, is there a safe harbor applied to SQF when you have other co-locators on your pole?
So as a CLEC in Massachusetts, we are subject to pole attachment regulation by the DPU, and so there's a regulatory regime that governs pole attachment as a pole owner, because we're we're regulated by them. Typically, though, our attachment negotiations with wireless carriers are contractual arrangements, so the regulations don't kick in. That's a negotiation between us and the carrier.
You all set, Mike?
Yeah.
All right, Chip, you want to?
Yeah, just curious, is small cell technology, is this considered a Band-Aid technology for fixing 4G issues right now? Or is it scalable to where we want to go in 5G and IoT and things beyond that?
Yeah, so the expectation is that 5G will require many more small cells to deliver the kind of connectivity people are talking about for IoT uses, for example. And primarily that's a function of the spectrum that is used for 5G, which is a relatively high frequency spectrum. It doesn't propagate as far, so it needs to be located close to users, and it has a high throughput, so it's a relatively high frequency spectrum that's used for that. And so to do that, you need to put lots of small antennas closer to users. So the expectation is that while this is being used on LGE for infill right now, as you see 5G expand first to fixed and eventually to mobile, you'll see more of these antennas located close to users. This is not a problem that you'll need to solve once. That makes sense.
Right, so small cell this technology is the future of 5G. It's not just a like I said, like a Band-Aid to get there.
No, that's accurate, yep.
Okay, so, I mean, it's just something to think about where, I think I read that there was a $250 million in infrastructure planned upgrades for 5G, so it's definitely an issue we're gonna have to address, so just keep that in mind.
Okay, Steve?
I just had two more comments. So in terms of economic development, the idea for the downtown is to have mixed use, which would entail actually us adding second stories to buildings. How does that play into your coverage area? Because I think as today, it's all, except for the building you're putting it in front of, it's all single story heading out towards the west. Does that have an impact on selection?
So one of the benefits of this particular location is it's near the center of the intersection, so it's able to propagate down the roadway. So even if you put buildings, and that's where the people are, right? The people are on the street, they're in their cars, they're in the windows of those buildings. And so that might have some effect, but really the problem that this is solving is people on the main thoroughfares.
Okay, so that was my other question is, we're kind of, we're in the position, right, to do what's in the best interest of the town. So are we providing a service that the town needs, or are we providing a service, enhancing a service for commuters that go back and forth that don't live here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a...
I guess to ask the question a little bit more pointed, if you could go back to AT&T and ask them how many complaints have the receptions been for the people in town, that would be an interesting idea. But I think from what I hear from you guys, it could just be whoever's on the roadway at the time, and that's the issue.
I don't know if AT&T's data would be that granular to be able to say this person lived here or this person was in a car commuting through. But I can see what information we can provide.
Well, you mentioned
around service complaints.
Complaints, though, right?
Yeah. Let me take that back and see what we can find on that. I just don't know how granular that information will be.
But you did say that the reason why they want to put it here is because of the bad coverage and complaints.
Yeah,
correct?
that's what Mr. Morgan said. So I just wanted to...
If it's from complaints, then you should have that regular.
Yeah, but I also think there's one distinction that he made, and maybe it was sort of lost in the telling, that there's lots of places where service could be improved, and so what gets a specific area kind of bumped up the list as this is a problem we need to solve is that. So it's a combination of specific concerns from customers and network need, and there's a comparison between the two that they're looking at when they decide where to go next, if that makes sense. But I don't have that information right in front of me, and I can take it back and see what we can find out.
Sure, thank you. Derek?
Okay. I think, as a board, have to look to the future, Skip talked about, and I think we have a responsibility to do that. But it's sort of, how do we do that? So, I mean, I can put out some ideas of mine that perhaps I see in the future, and I would love to see you guys back here. But at this point, to allow you guys to put one pole in the center of town, I don't see that as productive for the whole town. We're sort of capped, it sounds like, limited to what we can require for fees. But, let's go back some years, let's look at this room and look at the technology that we've got in that room right there and all of these cameras up overhead. And that's pretty much provided for by our cable companies and Verizon, I believe, correct? And I think that going into the future, if we could put something together with somebody that we see it as getting townwide coverage, but something of this sort back in a package. In other words, we're allowing this, but what are you gonna provide for the town, other than just good coverage in someone's house or in their car, on their phone? So, and I don't know if you've got any areas that your company has looked to. Now, it sounds to me like, you're basically a cell tower company, and then you lease those out to the carriers.
So we don't
You're
generally
not a
have-
wireless company, you're a cell tower company, basically.
The model is similar to a cell tower company, but it's for utility poles. yes.
Okay, so now, I see some benefit there, because you could put multiple things and have multiple service on there that would provide, because we got 5 different selectmen, and we might have 5 different carriers. Okay, so that's like with the cable right now, we're sort of limited to 2 carriers. So in a way, I see your company as more beneficiary, because we'd be dealing directly. If I'm looking to the future for what can you do for us, so I don't know if, you're saying you're nationwide, so if you've got any models out there that you can say, well, in this small town, here's what we provided for the town. Now, I could see perhaps, and I can't speak for everybody, I'm speaking for myself, I can't speak for the light department company, but I gotta look to the whole town. And if you had some package that you say I could come in, because if we were to, let's say, well, in the future, we've got Verizon is providing the service here now and that, along with the cable, and we think that, we want to stick with them, would you do that? Well, we're all now kind of stuck to one phone service to get the best. Where if you are dealing with a tower company, you could have multiple services. I see that as a little bit of a benefit, but I'd like to see, more than how are you going to benefit the town, other than a bunch of FCC communication rulings as to why we need to allow you to come in here.
Yeah, so I would defer to your attorney on sort of.
I don't know if you can answer that tonight, I hope you don't.
No, so I'm not your attorney, so I defer to your attorney on sort of the town's right to impose franchise fees on a CLEC like SQF or a wireless carrier. I'm not familiar with a sort of a statutory or local authority to do that, but that may exist, and I'm just not aware of it. I would say the business model for this is a lot.
Someone's got to start.
Yeah, could be you guys. I guess what is helpful from our perspective is 2 things. One, to the extent that you can identify ways in which our application is missing some information that would be useful to you. That's both a requirement of federal law and really just helpful for us in getting you what you need to consider this application. And so if we could get that, sometime soon, I think there's a 30-day deadline in the FCC's rules, but really any anytime you can get it to us so we can give you what you need to consider our application.
I'd say you get a copy of this tonight, because you've got a lot of
Yeah, no, I've been taking notes. And
I think Steve's question, I think, is really relevant here. It's, when we talk about asking a town, to put something like this up, where we also have our, municipal light department was against it, right? So now you almost have to say, all right, well, why are we going to do it, right? And to Steve's point is, because if you look at downtown, right, we have a bank, right, downtown, but then we have like 4 restaurants, all right? I don't think they're taking all this, all this cell service away, all right?
You would be surprised, really.
I would be surprised, because I don't know why they would take a lot of cell. I think Town Hall, I guess, would take a lot of that network available, but other than the bank, I don't see it. So I do think it is actually people that are coming through town based on all the traffic that comes through here. And for that reason, I gotta say, I don't know if I want to do this to our downtown so that we can enable people from, and no offense to anybody from Boxford and Groveland and everybody else, but we shouldn't be doing that for folks who want to pass through town to get home, and we're stuck with this monstrosity downtown. And then, excuse my French, I don't,
3 on instead of 1 in the downtown like you're talking to, but you could perhaps go a little further out.
Well, and that's the thing. Maybe that's more of a. But anyway,
I don't think the light department was really saying no.
Well, they're saying
I think
no
they were
now.
saying,
They have to
yes,
learn a little
yes,
bit more.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think. So listen, gentlemen, I certainly appreciate you guys coming in. It's a lot of information to digest. I think Steve's point, is really relevant here in terms of trying to maybe get us some data, on that. And maybe there's some other questions, that we have. So I also think that, maybe, if need be, maybe the board can dictate whether we need them to come back, based on some questions, some outlying, issues that we have. But, I think now it's just a matter of data collection, trying to get our arms around this. I think Kip's point is really relevant, in terms of where, technology's going. So we got to keep that in mind as well. But, we'll also collaborate with town council. We're going to figure out, what we are, required to do, what law is not. So, I'm going to have one more statement, and then we're going to be done, because we've already kind of gone there.
Because I was just going through this letter. So has SQF formally applied to the town?
Yeah, that was our submission on October 23rd.
Pardon me?
That was our submission on October 23rd, yes.
So you're saying that we have 150 days to act?
Yep.
Under the existing federal, the FCC order, yes.
Right.
So that's,
5G.
I guess that that would apply to regardless of the technology. So this is for all small cells.
Right.
But again, that's a conversation with your attorney. I guess what would be helpful from our perspective is, in addition to anything we're missing, sounds like the Chairman's identified some things that would be helpful. It's really, if this is a problem you're interested in solving, right? Like we're not going to be the last entity to come into the downtown. You're talking about economic development in the downtown. I think it sounds like it's an open question for you whether economic development in downtown Georgetown is going to require better high-speed connections and wireless service. That's a question for you all to consider. But we are totally interested in working in a collaborative way, trying to find a solution that works locationally, aesthetically, and the needs of our client. But that process, we're kind of working on a timeline here, and so there's a relatively narrow window to start that conversation.
Listen, if you have anything to take back with you, I think it's all of us agree that aesthetically this is not the right spot. Aesthetically, right? I'm not, and I think we need to somehow look at this. To Kim's point, it's it's there, right? We can't just turn our back on it. But aesthetically, it just doesn't work.
Okay.
That's
all feedback.
Go ahead then.
So let's say that 150 days happens and the Board of Selectmen, who have the responsibility of issuing a license and okaying this, says no, then what?
So the rule, again, I'm not your attorney here, but the rule sets out requirements that you have to meet in that rejection, and then there's a then what for us and our client about how we'd respond to that rejection. And I just don't know what that would be.
No, I was just curious. Tim, do you know what would happen John, I'm sorry. I call my kids, you guys. I'm sorry, John.
I would confirm that the 150-day shot clock would apply here to their application. Right now, in an existing federal statute, there's a right of appeal on a denial after that. They have to make the decision whether they want to appeal the denial. Likely to go to federal court the way we're familiar with cell towers. Same appeal process.
Okay.
But what if it's something that we say, you know, what, we don't want to do this with the pole here? I mean, are we still within that 150-day window to say, all right, can you come back with something else? You know, I mean, I think Doug was trying to really kind of pinpoint, is there an alternative plan here? You know, if this location doesn't work. Is that something that you guys can go back even now? Because you're hearing some pretty strong feedback, and we do have this time frame, and maybe we can just start working it now. You know, I think I would, you know, like to see if you guys have an alternative location.
Yeah, I think
Because I don't think it's the technology we're opposed to here. I mean, I think it's something we have to look at. I just think it's aesthetically. Again, New York City, they don't care. The poles are all around the
they
place.
care.
No one knows.
They care a lot.
I think, you
Historic
know,
preservation.
people in New York, you know, in the city, I don't think they care that much. But certainly not more than, say, someone who's walking downtown. And because I guess what I'm saying is there are poles everywhere. Here, people are going to notice this immediately.
For sure. So I think the scenario would be ideally trying to avoid is the kind of bring me a rock, no, not that rock scenario, right? So if you can maybe give us some suggestions on who or the way to have that kind of back and forth conversation about this, you know, this location's not good. Maybe we can come back to you with other locations and have that kind of collaborative conversation. Obviously, like this meeting doesn't kind of lend itself to that structure, and I can't always guarantee we'll have the right people in the room until we figure out who to have that conversation. I don't know if it's a subcommittee. I don't know if it's a conversation with the municipal light plant, but this feels like a solvable problem. Just figuring out the right way for that collaboration to take place would be really helpful from our perspective.
I think he
I'd
mentioned,
recommend you speak to private business owners. If cost isn't an issue here, which I thought in the beginning I heard it was, but now I'm thinking that that's not the only, you know, expand out to private business owners. If the idea is to improve the coverage, that has to be an option. I mean, if you guys are coming to us tonight saying this is our only option, we don't really have a plan B, that makes me think that it's all about the cost, just to be honest with you.
Which it really shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be about, yeah. I mean, if the goal for AT&T and for you guys is to improve coverage, if you come to us tonight and say that we really don't have a plan B, then that in my mind is, this is the way that we can do it. Nothing.
And I hope that wasn't the message. I think maybe that got lost in translation. So I think what I was trying to say here is, if this location is unacceptable to the town, it sounds like I'm hearing some pretty strong feedback that this may be AT&T's plan A, but it definitely would not be the town's plan A. I'm just not sure sort of where structurally that conversation about where
I think it starts with
place.
Mike. So, you know, Mike and then, you know, Lupus in. I'd like the light department to be involved.
you
know, with
mentioned
that
three
as well,
names in
so.
the application. I'd say those three people.
Yeah, I would. I know David was on it. Who were the other two?
John Cashel, Mike, and Dave.
So I would say we really struggled.
And there you go. I agree.
So we really struggled to get to this setting here by reaching out to those groups. So if that's the guidance from the select board.
Well, now that we're engaged with the conversation and we've had this meeting, those three gentlemen, where two are here tonight, right?
No,
And you know, if you reach out to those people, I think they'll be engaged, and I hope they would be engaged, at least knowing what the parameters are here. Right, we have a certain window that we're going to have to respond. So, you know, I know Mike and David are here. If you reach out to them, I would ask if you would stay engaged, and you know, maybe when you have an alternative, come back and we can kind of say.
So it's a wooden pole.
It is, yes.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
The equipment attaches to the side of the pole, and the transmitter, we'll call it, is on
The
top
antenna,
of,
yeah.
on top of that pole. So, okay. And then if you were to add other carriers, like Verizon or T-Mobile or Sprint or whomever, that would they have, they'd have a different antenna up there? Or?
Yeah, so obviously the pole top would be taken there, so they would be placing antennas around the body of the pole.
On the body of the pole.
Okay, John, we're gonna have to move on.
I look forward to
Thank you so
learning more
much, we
about
really
it.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your time.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
answering the questions.
Appreciate it very much.
David, thank you for the time and attending.
Thank you, Jim.
Attorney Ackman, thank you so much, for being here.
Yes, and sorry for my faux pas.
That's it, thanks for being here.
I grew up with my father calling me Barrett.
Have a good night, gentlemen. Thank you. Jimmy, why don't you come on up? How we doing? Good. Thanks for hanging in there, listening. Why I said this building. This building, and
This is something that Mike just needed.
oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
All of these were of other places. Mr. Chair, I thought that at our last meeting, we were going to discuss this at our second meeting.
You did say this meeting.
Can we get another one?
sorry.
Mike?
Yeah.
I can rec.
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna.
It was tonight, I thought.
Yeah, what we were gonna do is discuss some thoughts that the board had. We're gonna invite Jimmy in and get his input into where we're at. Again, it's just it's open discussion.
Gary doesn't have.
Gary,
It's free, correct?
3, right?
Admin, ops, and blend.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
I sent, these are job descriptions that I've developed for other towns. Well, for another town. They had a different model of how to run their Parks and Recreation Department. And what Jim did was take the two and blend them together.
Okay.
Yeah, my
Jimmy,
thought
thank
is,
you again, for putting some time into this.
my thought is this would be great for a town bigger than us, and I think 10 years from now, there might be a possibility of having two. But I think we're looking at one, so I wanted to take the best from both and kind of blend it into one person for the next probably 10 years, and then as the town grows, there might be opportunities to do more. So it's a dual hat type of try to blend.
Yeah, and Jimmy, if you could, just 1 second. So what we've done so far,
Yeah.
okay, on the board, and why we wanted to have you in, tonight is, we've literally had, a mile, long, nothing serious, just some very casual,
Yeah.
conversations about the possibility of doing something with your input about the fact that the job may have kind of
Yeah.
spurred into something bigger than maybe the current board can handle.
Yeah.
I've talked to town council about what we can do,
Yeah.
from a legality standpoint. They're okay with it. So what we really wanted to do is start to kind of pinpoint, things like this, job description. We have to talk about salary, see if we can
Yeah.
get something in there for salary. But we do have to identify what the position is, right, and what it's going to encompass.
And
And we wanted to invite you for your input, because you've been doing it for a while.
Sure.
In terms of, what you see, what's your vision?
So my thought on it too is, I think it's really want to be waited to the summer, the 2 months of the summer. But also, normally, you also want to have some, we'll probably try to take, we have someone does, he's a teen counselor, we'll probably have to use his salary to absorb into this, so, I would think 50% in the summer, and then 50% of that salary spread over the rest of the year with programs going in the fall, winter. We have a number of programs that get done in the rest of the year as well.
So you're saying you think this position is a year-round position rather than?
But I wanted to structure it for someone like a gym teacher who's a school teacher. He can do this full-time in the summer, and maybe every other week, maybe 5 hours a week for the rest of the year as a fill-in. So it's basically dedicated for a full-time position when someone, especially a gym teacher or any teacher, can go in and do it full-time in the summer, but then,
Yes.
so, because we still want to have like GA, all their scheduling done. I mean, they can do that at home but it's just, there's a lot of basketball, baseball, and during the school year.
Yep.
And they can still supplement their income, but more of a flex hour during the off year, and then full-time in the summer when they get done. That's how, there was a number of, 20 years ago, there was a full-time person who was doing that.
Okay.
And that's how they would run, like, Canopy Lake one month, and the next month it would be a ski trip, and we have the elderly now, maybe it's something for the elderly, just do a number of different, they have dances, we do all the dances, so maybe a dance in the Christmas season. So they would fill in their schedule the other 9 months, which is little town activities, whether it be a snow, they could do a hike in the fall at the right time and just supplement that type of thing, but they would still be doing the scheduling for all the GAA and all the others. And there's other things, getting equipment ready for the coming spring. What's going to happen, working on the program, and then I would figure probably eventually you'd have 2 high school kids hired in the summer to supplement him, with one being a lifeguard and the other one just being a maintenance person.
Yep. And also this person, with admin, I think we all agree that that's something that that has to be done as well. So, okay, that's a little, different.
Because, I can take, what's his name? We're going to take, I've lost his name now, but he's been the activities director now for 20 years.
Rick Gardella?
Rick Gardella. And if that salary's going to go into this and that job's just going to change, then some of his services,
Oh, sounds like Rick could be a good candidate.
I agree. I think he could be a good candidate, but there's to be enough. Like any other job, there'll be a number of people.
It's over in Haverhill, but he was the teen center director when we tried to establish a teen.
Yeah, he was the Lawrenceville football coach for a number of years, so he's been with kids and.
Right, I think he's over. I think his full-time job is in Haverhill.
Not anymore. I don't know. I don't know what he's doing now, but he's definitely someone I would think of being on the interview list. But
Jim, so you put this together. Why don't we go through this?
Sure.
The blend, and I'll give it to you so you can kind of go through it with us and kind of give us your vision.
okay, so I put that's just responsible for the supervision and management of all parks, recreational facilities, including rail trail when finished. Although seasonal nature, with most hours required in the summer at American Legion Park, this is a full-year position with the ability to flex hours outside the summer season. This position provides recreational opportunities for residents of all ages and will assist the need in both passive and active recreation. Provides administrative and clerical support to the Parks and Recreation Commission, and is responsible for the planning, coordination, organization, and supervision of all programs offered by the Parks and Recs Department.
Can I just ask you one question?
Yeah, sure.
Is there anything in here that we want to add about overseeing any projects that the town's doing?
Yeah,
or your
there is,
vision-
I did get that as an essential function.
Oh, you do? Okay, great.
Yeah, essential functions is, you'll see it as one of the lists, because I added that. That was,
Okay, great.
initiates correspondence and advertisements for employment reviews and response to correspondence under the direction of the board. Processes and screens all applicants for employment, responsible for hiring with the approval of the commission, basically discussion, I want to hire these 3, whatever. If that comes to a point of needing to hire. Manages and supervises programs to maintain a level of quality expected from the Parks and Recreation Commission. This includes scheduling and supervision of all summer and seasonal program personnel. Communicates to make sure the summer staff is aware of the committee's expectations and they remain on task with schedules and responsibilities. Oversees the schedules, fields, and facilities. Oversees and schedules fields and facilities use on all town property under the responsibility of the Park and Rec. Purchases and maintains inventories of supplies and equipment needed for all summer programs within budget guidelines. Oversees work on all Park and Rec facilities and ensures that all specific work is done according to specification. That's the added that you saw.
Great.
Keeps maintenance report files on all areas to the committee and attends Park and Rec meetings as required or requested. So I'm not, that's, makes recommendations regarding all disciplinary actions or firing, responsible for termination of personnel upon review with town manager and commission. That being a legal issue that, that's probably a three-way if that ever comes to tuition. Helps prepare preliminary annual budget, annual report for review and approval of the commission. I'm sorry, I read, helps prepare preliminary annual budget, annual report for review and approval of the commission. Then the supervision works under the direct supervision of the Park Rec Commission, must be able to work without supervision. Qualifications, the only thing I didn't add here is he's got to be Corey checked. High school diploma with 2 years of experience in a work situation requiring the use of basic organization and supervisory skills required for this position. There should be something about just, Corey check required.
You have it under certifications and license.
Oh, I do? Okay, okay, sorry. That has the knowledge and skills and abilities. A candidate for this position have ability to plan, schedule, and coordinate events with attention to detail is essential. Ability to establish and maintain effective working relations with employees, supervisors, volunteers, community leaders, and general public is essential. Ability to communicate effectively orally and in written and in writing to plan and supervise the work of volunteers is essential. Requires strong communication skills as duties require coordination between other town departments, the school system and the other town departments, the school system and the community as well as the committee members. Needed for a self-directed and self-starting person requiring ability to complete duties without direct supervision, strong organizational skills. And then all I have for certification is a mass driver's license and have a reliable auto available during work hours, certified in first aid, CPR, and water safety, rescue techniques. Need to pass Corey check. The water safety rescue techniques, I'm not sure he's going to be lifeguard. This one was structured, probably is not required because it's not, they would hire a lifeguard person would have those. I would probably take that out. Equipment operated includes standard office equipment and a variety of equipment for sportings and games. Ability to operate an ATV is required, only because that's what they drive around to. Physical demands described here are representative of those that must be met by an employee to successfully perform the essential functions of this job. And it says reasonable accommodations may be made to enable individuals with disabilities to perform essential functions. While performing the duties of this job, the employee is regularly required to stand, walk, sit, use hands to finger, handle, or feel, reach with arms, hands, and legs, climb and balance, stoop, kneel, crouch, and crawl, see or hear. Heavy lifting, pushing of 20 pounds or more is regularly required. That was something that was off the original. I just changed 100 pounds to 25. And then the work environment just talks about the work environment characteristics, describes here reasonable of those of an employee encounters while performing essential functions of this job. Reasonable accommodation be made to enable individuals with disabilities to perform the essential functions. The work environment is beach environment, including cool, windy weather, as well as heat and exposure to sun. Outdoors in all weather, must be in good physical condition. Setting up and moving beach equipment, walking along beach in perimeter controls, constant exposure to sun. That there's a change there that needs to be made. Consequences of errors could result in excessive costs, reduction of services provided to the public, or direct legal repercussions, particularly as regarding water safety. Limited access to some confidential information is required. It would be.
Okay, well, so thank you for going through that. So questions from the board on this?
Yeah. Jim, in your best estimation, how many hours a week on average would you see this being?
So right,
I know you said full-time summer, but then.
no,
you
I
have-
mean, in the 8 summer weeks, when I say July 1st till September 1st, it's probably going to be 25 to 30 hours a week. He would go in for probably 4 hours in the morning, and then, so that's 7 days now, so that's about 3 hours a day, maybe 4 hours a day. 2 hours in the morning, depending on what he has, he's open the park in the morning, close the park in the evening, it's 2 and 2. If he has staff that's, what I said, if you got a kid that's a lifeguard and a kid doing, two kids doing lifeguard work, one doing lifeguard work, one doing maintenance, and he'd probably open the park in the morning, it's an hour, close in the morning, closing the park in the evening, it's an hour, and then 2 hours in the middle of the day.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to
Yeah.
get an idea. Would it be like average 20 hours a week, 15 hours a week?
At
25
those 8
hours a
weeks, it'd probably be, I would say, 25 to 30 hours a week, and then the rest of the season is probably 30 hours a month, or 20 hours a month.
Okay.
The scheduling, the thing is, the scheduling is involved in the permitting, processing permits. I think if you figure 4 weeks and it's, 6 hours or 5 hours a week, that's 20 hours a month. Yeah, I think he can, he'll be getting in GA forms for this and GA forms for that, and he'll be taking permits for different, whether it be the pickleball court or the different areas. Then at the same time, we'll probably be looking at one activity a month or two. So I would think 20 hours a month that he flexes his time. So that's, I think though we have money in our budget that's, some of it's left over for salary, I still think, So I don't know how that plays out with that, but so you figure 20 hours a month for 10 months, that's 200 hours, and then 240. 30 times 4 is 120, 240, so it's like 440 hours. So a year, so you figure that at, I don't know what the pay would be for this posting, but I would say somewhere between 400 and 500 hours a year.
Great.
Steve, what would this be, a non-union employee, or was it, yeah?
Did you say non-union?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would be non-union. Any benefits or it's just a straight hourly
it's
rate?
seasonal.
Seasonal, so we do hourly rate or
If
something?
it was 30 hours a week, would qualify for benefits, but it's only for 8 weeks.
Okay.
I don't think from a cost structure standpoint, benefits can be included.
Yeah,
I
I'm just
think-
making
No.
sure that we're
I
all
think
on
it'll
the same
get,
page.
yeah, we'll be over our skis on that.
Yep, no,
So-
absolutely.
But in municipal work, 20 hours a week qualifies you for benefits. But this would be seasonal, so
Okay.
it's exempt.
It's exempt for it, good.
Over the years, I've gotten teachers, the last 30 years, two of the people doing, Peter Iversy was doing this job, he was a teacher, so it was summer work, supplement in their 20s. That would be a perfect possibility, or, man or woman who wants to, allows their spouse to come down there with the kids, and they work,
Yeah, it'd be great if we can open it up to people within town too, schools.
Yeah.
We'll have to
I mean, 'cause they
we'll
have
have
a
to post anyway.
Yeah, there's a vested interest.
So it would look, for round figures, an average of 10 hours a week, on an average.
Say that again?
Just a round figure average, 10 hours a week,
For the regular?
over 52 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And then it just gets broken up. It's more in the summer and
Right.
maybe less in some of the other seasons.
Yeah, it's like you said, this, I don't know what Juliet's doing for the scheduling, what she spends for time, but that's taken, she's still doing quite a bit, but I
probably ask.
didn't have a chance to talk to her before this meeting. But she's been helpful. She's been doing it just out of the kindness of her heart for the last couple of years, which is nice.
Kip, do you have a question?
the part that sticks out for me is that, we added oversee work on all park and rec facilities and ensures all specified work is done according to its specs.
So, okay, so typically, if we have a CPC project going down East Main Street, Peter would go do that or something, or Peter does, they cut down trees at the park. Sometimes Peter will go down and make sure the guy's doing it right, but not all times can I expect a non-park and rec employee to go down there and do it. If someone's doing a job, you're digging a trench, and make sure he digs the trench and does it right, I mean, I just don't want, if I have the ability to have a guy down there and Peter's got to go on vacation, or Peter doesn't have the time, and it's a simple task, someone's got to, clean up an area, and I mean, I want him to be able to go down and say, yeah, I did a good job. I want to say, one of your jobs is to read this, contract. That guy's going to mow that field and make sure he mows it, and not have to call Peter up to do that. That's all. So, I mean, I thought of not putting that in, because I said Peter will probably do the maintenance and stuff, but it's, if someone's repairing a light at the bandstand like we did this year, you got to make sure it's, you ask them, did you get the building and you get the lighting inspector to inspect it? I mean, someone's got to ask them that question. And
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're getting the right person for this. So would somebody, would this description depict somebody that would understand how to read those contracts and those specs to be able to do it the right way? Sounds like this is like a huge wish list, which is great, but
no one will hit it 100%, but you may rate that person, one person as a 20%, never done it, and someone as a 60.
That's why when we post, I mean,
Yeah.
we'll come and, talk to
Yeah.
everybody who might be interested, and then, like anything, then we have to kind of gauge who's best.
John Cashin wants to do this, he'll get 100. So. No, I mean, he might find a person, like you said, no one may not have all the skills, but there is a multiple hat job. That's why I didn't even want to put water and safety instructor. You'll probably be able to hire a strong kid to do that. All these jobs, and someone who's who can swim and save people is probably asking too much.
Jim, is that it?
sure, yeah.
Okay, Gary?
Nothing right now.
Okay, Doug, you looking?
So how do you see the, we would have, the way I'm thinking it, we would have park and rec commissioners, who then have an employee, right?
Similar a little bit to Steve and the Conservation Commission. I mean, it's running a little bit off of that. He would, we would, so, the summer program is one thing, but we're supposed to provide park and rec activities for everybody. So we would, as summer hours, we would know he's dedicated to the park, do certain things down there, making sure it's open, it's clean. I don't know what ultimately we'd have for that 8 weeks, whether we'd have the ability to get 1 or 2 kids to, a lifeguard down there or not, or 1 or 2 people to run activities. And he would basically be down there doing that full time. And then in the off season, there's a number of different things that Rick does, not just dances, but, and we would open it up now with the elderly down, there's pickleball courts that are being used, and there's now the community center for down there. There's, there may be opportunities to work some activities for that too.
Do you see the commissioners being hands-on people like they are now?
Well, we're all getting older, so I mean, we're less hands-on now than we were 20 years ago.
Right.
I also think possibly with the freeing up a lot of that hands-on, we may get more people wanting to join with less having to take out the docks and do all that stuff. I think the commissioners are, right now it would be. Dave's been here. We've been lucky to have Dave Showers here Monday through Friday during the working hours. Most of us still work, so there was a time that I could come down because I work close and just spend an hour down and go back to work. Like a lot of us can't do that now, so we're outside looking in 9 to 5.
Right.
And
so now, have you ever considered the possibility the dissolution of Parks and Recs and just having some other town department?
Yeah, and I think when Peter becomes the DPW, has a DP and he's in charge of all maintenance, and I'm not, like I said, if that's the skill that wants to be taken, that's not a problem either. Like I said, it's I think maybe to do a 2-year, 3-year to blend this job, maybe even a year, and especially with the rails trail. When the rails trail comes through, I think it'd be a perfect time to maybe make this position a little more powerful and maybe get rid of the park and rec, because at the same time, the Camp Dennison is, might need some help too, because the rail trail goes right by there. There might be some coordination that can be done there. And yeah, and making that, I mean, even though that's a conservation area, it's still a, recreational area for people that are using quite a bit. So you take this position, you roll it into some oversight there to help them. And, yeah, sure. It'd be great if we could find a, like you said, a full-time person.
Have you had an opportunity to have a meeting with the commissioners and see what their,
No, and actually, I thought we had a meeting tomorrow, but we don't have it until the 14th, so. Well, we had a discussion tentatively that I told them that I knew you had had some discussions, so it's just that they're having some discussions. I'll let you know more next meeting, and I'll
And if you could stress that, Jim, these are just discuss. I mean, we're
Oh, yeah,
just trying
no,
to
yeah.
see, throw everything against the wall, see what sticks, see
Yeah.
if there's any ideas that we're all comfortable with, that kind of thing.
No, I think it's a good time. I think the town's going to get bigger pretty fast when this rail trail goes through, and I think there's a lot of things that could be done. I mean, I could give you a list of potential monthly activities. I mean, even the business, I was thinking, even to get a park and rec, get someone up to the horse stables to try to get some business in those, because they're always trying to rent stables. You get on the webpage, you say, this day we're all going up and we're going to take a tour of the stables or something. As a recreational thing that you could do, or we're going through a walk through the state forest, so I can show you, you can park at the school at Pembroke, and you can walk through the, so someone does it once, they get used to doing it again, They're just not, too comfortable going through it the first time. On our greenway that we're trying to put behind the new park, going through around the ponds, when they get to a certain point, that show them that, where it's at now and where it will be in the future. There's a lot of activities that could be. Can't take them down the boat yet, though. Can't take them down the boat ramp, but other than that, maybe someday. Yeah. As a kid, we used to always go down to Cranes Beach by using the boat ramp, but those days seem to be over.
Okay, any other questions on this, at least?
Yeah, I would say that we still need a park and rec commission, I think, in the foreseeable future, at least. I mean, if you're gonna hire someone, you need oversight, right? And you still need a plan, what the vision of the town is and what direction we wanna go.
Yeah, I mean, you get the right guy, in a year we may say we don't need to be there. Like you
Yeah.
said, I agree. I think he may need to just get his feet wet, depending who it is, and
Yeah.
we may hit on someone who's really good, who's going to stick. I don't know what the hours and the who the person is.
Yeah, Gary, good.
It sounds like in the past, you've had people that have sort of done this. So my thoughts are, I put together some things, you asked us to come, but I was more looking at long-range plans, which I think we need to continue. So my thought was, yeah, maybe it's more to Mike. I mean, if we had someone on the guys working out really great, but we figured that we need to go to a better plan, then where are we? I guess we'd have to possibly lay off somebody if they couldn't fit the longer range plan. But it sounds like typically these are real temporary jobs. You get somebody maybe a couple of years, they don't do it. What has been your rollover, I guess, in the past?
Rick would have been lucky. He's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
He's been the teen activities director. I mean, that's worked out really lucky, but most of the position, we haven't had a position like this since I was a kid, and they were for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Steve Parent was one of them. I mean,
And that timing might work out if in the future we want to pull it together, like you said, when the rail trail opens up, who knows what's...
yeah, I mean, there'll be a lot of stuff you can do with you want to ultimately help the businesses too. I mean, certain parking areas you want to do, so they'll park in the right spot. You don't want to park on a street where they don't go into CVS or, I mean, there'll be plans where I got to park going down on Central Street. That'd be one place for them to park. But ultimately, you want to provide them good. So someone, will look at, work with maybe Mike and say, what are the places that we're going to put parking allowed? And I mean, I know when I was in Bedford, they put the rails trail in, and the town sued so it wouldn't go through their town, and then 5 years later, they sued so it would, because they brought so many coffee shops and bike shops to the, I mean, there'll be people moving in to put in certain things. It'd be nice. I think if people don't understand, because it's ours goes right through the center of town, there's opportunity to bring the people into the businesses. Most of them, like, I don't think Topsfield does so well, because most people go out to the outskirts of town, you know. I think this section behind the fire department is gonna be really big, because kids can go a long way in a stroller without crossing a major road, so a lot of being taught, a lot of mothers are gonna wanna walk the carriages and stuff and their kids along that section, you know. So, I think it's gonna be a great, the other side is, let's get it here.
Right.
You know, and that's something, and that, I'm sorry, that is also something that he could possibly work on too, as being a recreational thing, is attending those meetings and trying to push the Georgetown's, you know, whatever needs to be done to get it through.
Sure.
Because it'd be nice.
I think the present town planner has been being helpful.
Oh, yeah, I don't want to, no, I agree. It's a final push. I'd hate to, I mean, it's going to go right by the park, and behind the park, people will be able to walk down from all over town to go right down to the beach and use the rails trail, you know? All right,
Jim, thank you very much. If anybody else has any questions, comments for Jim? So we can.
No, just thank you, I mean,
Thanks for putting this
again,
together,
Jim, you put a lot together.
No, we don't have to talk about the budget right now. We're just talking about the position, so.
Thanks, Jim.
Jim, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, I know you, you put down some thoughts in terms of, you want to kind of go through them?
Well, yeah, I thought we need to pull together what we have. A lot of this I mentioned last week, you know, what we've got for land, parks, recreation fields. I thought we'd do that by use of the present paid staff. You know, we also pull together presently who's a custodian of those lands, or who's maintaining the above by using the paid staff. In other words, you know, we've got Mike and Janet. We've got people working for the Conservation Commission, you know, they could all perhaps help work on this, and the planning department. And then we just, you know, we add together what we're using for those, with town funds, grants, and/or private funds used now to maintain these properties and activities. I mean, it's you know, like some of the stuff that happens at American Legion Park is Cultural Council, and I've got no clue what comes in. I think that's some state money through the lottery system or something, but I could be wrong, but
They get a grant to do the summer program.
yeah, so I mean, there's things like that I think we need to see all of this in front of us, you know, so then I'm saying, then we should sit down at maybe several meetings to discuss how we proceed as a town, have discussion with those involved, and work to a plan that can move forward, and the finance of this position. But I mean, it looks, so I'm thinking they're more long range, you know. And, you know, as I mentioned also, you know, look to other towns for possible model plans. So that's about it. And if you need, I can have Janet make a copy of this tomorrow.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the, Kip, did you bring any feedback?
Yeah, so, I guess I'm just a little confused about what, you know, we originally started this conversation because we were trying to solve a couple of specific problems. In my opinion, like, this job description doesn't address those problems. So there's a disconnect here. I don't know what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you.
So, yeah, I mean, it's almost like on one side we're looking for sort of like a director of special projects to move sort of these capital projects and whatnot forward. But then we know that Jim, you know, needs some help with some of this other stuff. But I think some of those tasks just don't fit here. So I'm just struggling because I think there's a disconnect here. And I think part of that is that, you know, we really don't have a list of requirements for this role yet. We don't have them down on a, you know, a piece of paper, and maybe we all need you just to consolidate that and figure out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is a good start. I mean, you put
definitely
some nice things on the paper.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think there's a disconnect in terms of what that role is. You know, from the original conversations we had at the beginning, the problems we were trying to solve, and what kind of we have here. To me, is two different things. So,
Yeah.
I'm be curious to hear what everyone else has to say.
Steve?
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Nothing yet?
Right now, but yeah, I mean, I think to Kip's point, you know, if the specific issues we have that we're trying to finish East Main Street and ALP, you know, whether it should be open or not, I mean, these the types of decisions that a commission would make, or is this something that we would want the person to do as part of their role?
Yep.
So.
Agreed. Done?
Well, besides what we've heard, we still have the major bee in the bonnet is American Legion Park, and then the finishing of East Main Street. So, I mean, it's good to have a director and all, but there's no plan on how do we address the issues of American Legion Park, and you just can't dump in here, do this, and then you get a guy that works on average now 10 hours a week, you know? So, we need to address it, we need to have some type of program, whether we've talked about a sticker program, or paid parking, or whatever the heck it is, you know? So that all needs to be included with what Kip was saying, Gary's saying, everybody just.
And that's absolutely, you know, on, oh, probably, go ahead, Steve, I'll let you.
Isn't the idea, though, that the park and rec today, that's why I was surprised to hear that, you know, there's a possibility of not having a park and rec at this point, or, you know, if this position would pan out. I was thinking that the whole idea was that this person can help Park and Rec with the day-to-day operations that are consuming their time. Once they have help there, it's going to free them up to do the planning for ALP, to do the planning for East Main Street, and to start to think about these things that, you know, the town's raising.
That's why I asked him if he saw the commissioners being hands-on people,
Yeah.
like they are now.
Yeah.
So,
So, when I first started thinking about this, that was my vision. I personally would not structure it like conservation. I think the person coming in should be top of the house. Okay, I envision this person coming in and really taking hold, you know, of this group of people, and like I said, being the top of the house to say, okay, you know, I'm going to delegate responsibilities. This person, you're in charge of this. This person, you're in charge of that. I don't envision this person reporting up to the commission. I think they should be top of the house. Then, as we are the appointing board, I would like the person then to come back to this board and report back to what's going on, you know, some of the things that they're doing, progress on East Main Street, you know, things of that nature, all the while keeping, you know, Parks and Rec in place, but having just them being the top of the house in managing that group, all right, and having them report back to us, at least in the, you know, short term, you know, and having a little bit more, you know, oversight into what's going on. With that being said, to Doug's point, yeah, I would want to talk to whoever we put in place to, you know, implement some of those things, you know, the park. I firmly envision a kind of sticker program. I think that it's something that we absolutely need to do. I think it would subsidize some of the costs that go into possibly not only some of the salary that we have to pay this person, but maybe even having someone down there, you know, taking the money, you know, for parking, overseeing kind of what's happening on a daily basis down at ALP, reporting anything back to our police department, you know, okay, in terms of problems or whatever it may be. But part of their responsibility, you know, would be that. So, and I think if you have someone top of the house who's delegating some responsibility down to the members of Parks and Rec to go, all right, you do this, you do this, you do this. That director is also responsible for maybe some of those day-to-day responsibilities themselves. And then from an admin standpoint, some of the things that we're missing today filing paperwork and things of that nature, they're also responsible for. So I would rather not see, this position, kind of put in place like conservation. That works for them. I'm not sure if it works here, especially from a seasonal standpoint. I also, I like, Jim's thought of, the summer and, 50% summer, 50% the rest of the year. At least initially, I see this position as, and I've said it before, spring, summer, beginning part of fall, and that's it. And then come back beginning of spring again and start over. At least initially, it could sprout out. I think Gary had said it. It could turn into something, more long-term, but I think that's what we can kind of start with. And then as we see how the job progresses, if we see more need for it to be an ongoing year-round thing, then, hey, we can implement that and see what it entails.
So you see that as a administrative position?
It's an all-inclusive position. It's responsible for administration, delegating, but also performing some of the duties. If the fields, for example, at ALP has to be mowed and there's no one there to do it, then get on a tractor and go do it. They're responsible. Here's your job description. Get it done. Okay, get it done. One way or another, get it done.
The commissioners aren't, I'm just playing devil's advocate. The commissioners are not employees.
Right.
They're volunteers.
Well, there's one that is salaried, right? I believe. Is there one that is paid?
Commission?
Yeah.
No.
I thought there was
They're all-
one member that had, okay, my bad then. I thought there was one that did some things. Okay. Yeah, but, I know, absolutely know that. And as Jim said, a lot of them, the 9 to 5 thing, isn't working for them. They don't have the time. So this director would really have to get his hands dirty, and him or her, by the way. And again, you have a job to do, get it done, one way or another. Constantly.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm completely on board about having the person be at the top of the house. I think because that puts us in a position that they would report to the Board of Selectmen. And do we want to, as the board, be involved with all the day-to-day decision makings of the park and rec, of all our parks?
Would we
and rec?
have to?
Well, if you don't have a commission that's handling that, then, and he isn't reporting to Michael, he has to report to somebody, right? He or she.
Yeah, but they're not, what are we asking them to report is the question. We don't need a report that they mowed ALP. I think maybe a monthly report to say, all right, these are some of the ongoing issues from an administrative standpoint, say East Main Street, all right? If that person was in place, all right, I filed this, I filed that, I filed, the other thing, waiting for this feedback from whatever.
Yeah.
That kind of, we don't need reports necessarily that, fails remote. I just think we need, something that, okay, things are going well, here's, a monthly report. Kind of like, Chief Mitchell sends us, those reports, right?
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
I mean, I also think just from a, town standpoint, I think it's always good to have members of a community, right, who we vote for, or we appoint, right, and allow them to kind of set the direction of what the town wants to do, as opposed to having this one person, right, if he isn't going to report to us directly, then he or she, it's going to be free reign for them, right, to do what they want or what specific items they think are most important to the town. If that isn't the case, they're going to need direction from somebody, and it's ultimately it's going to be us.
Yeah. Well, that direction, yes. I am firmly ready to do something like that.
But that's another responsibility that we'd have to take over
Initially.
in the board, as opposed just to making policy and in dealing with what the financial impacts of the town. I just think it's a whole other area that, as selectmen, I don't think that we need to get into the details of it, but that's just my opinion.
Well,
Sorry.
Go ahead, Gary.
I think, Joe, you need to put it down. I mean, you've got the ideas in your head, and this, you know, you need to put it down like it's been done here by Jim. I think you worked with a model that Mike gave him,
Yeah.
but I mean, you've got something here to work with. If you're gonna make the changes and put it in front of us, then at least we can look at it, just like this one, and go over it.
Yep.
So, I mean.
No, and I can certainly do that, but again, just open conversation, getting, you know, different thoughts, you know, as far as the position, so.
Can we improve what's happening in American Legion Beach in the summer? Of course. Do we need a stick-up program? I'm not sure. But remember, I see a beach that's getting used. Some of us may not be happy with the way that beach is getting used, but it's getting used, and that's what it's meant to, that's what it's meant for. Can we improve some of the, I'll call them issues? Because, again, we've had no major problems down there. So, but, you know, doesn't mean that something can't happen in the future, and being prepared for that, I think is what we need to look at. So, you know, if one of these things, I noticed what Mike, you said you gave us the others, Mike? You know, we got the blend, because I noticed one of them was collecting money for the sticker program and that, so obviously there was some type of sticker program, I thought. I just briefly looked them over, I thought
Yeah,
that was on there.
those came from another town that I,
Yeah, so I mean, then there's, that's what I'm saying, then there is something out there, there's other towns out there that are doing programs.
Oh, no,
of that
definitely.
type.
I mean,
And I mean,
I know that.
you know, if that's the best way that we wanna go, you know, I think we need to be helpful in doing that. I thought we were, you know, we tried to set them up with an attorney before, and I don't know what happened with that. I remember once before, we said, let's have, I think that might have been to the signs and that, I mean.
yeah, they helped develop the
The rules and regulations.
rules and regulations.
And so if that, we may need to do something in that sort to get a sticker program going. And if something of that was done, I could see blending that in with this job description that you've got here. I mean, East Main Street, I think there's a bigger picture there that's probably coming down the road that you know, we've had the bid all came in over.
Yeah.
So, you know, they haven't had the meeting yet, and you need to figure out I did mean to ask him, did they have any plans for your next step? And with all the conversation, it went out of my mind, I should have wrote it down, but I think that might be a bigger picture for more to get involved in there, you know, on what's happening at East Main Street.
Gary, you gonna be at that next meeting, by the way?
I don't think so.
No, okay. I was just wondering, you know.
Unless
how
I
we can get some
maybe can
feedback.
attend by phone if they can set it up.
Yeah, okay. Or we can just ask for the feedback, you know, of that meeting. So I think, you know, first and foremost, we gotta figure out, you know, how we're gonna structure, you know, something, right? I mean, we can appoint, we can hire, you know, the person, okay? We figure that out. So if we ever get to that point, you know, we can post, you know, okay, we can interview. But we really have to figure out how we want to structure that board. I mean, do we, you know, position it like conservation, or do we do it, you know, some other way? Then we got to figure out, you know, from what Kip said, you know, as well, is we have to figure out exactly, you know, what that person's doing. And, you know, the thing too about, you know, if we structure it the other way, where you have a director and then you have the commission, is right now the commission is actually doing, you know, some of those functions, right? They're doing the cutting of the grass, and they're doing the cleaning down at ALP and some other parks.
They have a guy that does the cleaning and that.
Yeah, right? So, if we hire a director, I wouldn't want, you know, those same people who are volunteering their time to think the director is actually the person who's gonna do all of that. Because they're gonna have a lot of different duties, including admin, you know, some ops, whatever. So I would want them to stay active to get those jobs done as well, which is why I say, you know, this director position is more, for me, top of the house, so they can still delegate like Jim currently does, right? Because that's what Jim does, right? He's currently delegating.
No, I think they all work together. I think they, from what I've seen, remember, I've only been on the board for a couple meetings, but I mean, I have made several of their meetings, and I personally have got to know some of them. And I think they each have different areas on where they go and what they do. I know, like, there's one that I think pretty much stops daily, at least during the week, while there's an employee there, and he goes down and helps to direct that. I think, you know, there's another one that's been very involved up on West Street, on the fields there. I think Jim has been very involved, extremely involved, in trying to push forward the East Main Street project. So I think they all sort of take things in that each. The other one is...
Right, so they all have their jobs, right?
Well...
So how do you have a director then, where the same people are doing the jobs, and now, you know, that same director who's delegating has to then report back to the people, you know, that are part of the, you know, it just seems a little odd to me if they're delegating all that stuff out.
I'm gonna say, I see the way you're mentioning it,
Yeah.
being from this person being from the top down. I mean, I don't know that we've got anything in town that works like that. And if I'm on the board and that person that's being paid to make sure these things start getting done starts telling me and delegating to me what I've got to do, I'm sorry.
Well, do we have-
I don't want to tell you right now what I'd probably tell them.
Don't we have groups
Okay,
downstairs
that's
where you
on
have
TV.
a boss and the boss delegates responsibility,
No.
right? We have different
But
departments downstairs.
the park, you know, I see it as the Park and Recreation Commission are the bosses.
Volunteers, though, the
Yes,
different.
I see them as they are the bosses. That's the function of them. Now you're trying to find an employee that works for them. So that's, you know, I just don't see your model working. I don't know, Mike, is there anything like that out there that you're aware of? Or, I mean, I guess it's got to be the right personalities mix, but
The only model out there that works with is the town manager form of government. And it's the town managers in charge, not the boards.
yeah. So that's really high level.
Yeah. And this
Then we wouldn't have
commission
a-
was established through Mass General Law by the town meeting. So the advice you got that the Board of Selectmen is the hiring authority, I think is not accurate.
Oh, then we gotta revisit that.
Yeah.
We
Because
we
those-
just appoint the commissioners.
That's right.
The hiring would go through the personnel director, I think.
Well, they're
Go through the commission.
they're the hiring authority as far as I'm aware,
Okay,
not the Board of Selectmen.
right, okay.
I mean, we've got 11 hiring authorities in this town,
Yeah.
maybe 13.
Well, that's an important point. If you could reach back out to Tim, and Tim said it right in front of us, right? I mean, Tim said we could do it.
Yeah, I think Tom
Tim.
McEnany has a better handle on it.
Well, no, but Tom said it too. Both of them said it.
Yeah.
I spoke to Tom first. He deferred then to Tim after he said, yes, we can. He said, just to make sure, let me talk to Tim. That's when Tim and
I
I
thought
spoke.
I was hearing it more as it might be in conjunction together possibly, but I don't even know that was what I heard.
Well, just follow. I mean, you know, because obviously that's an extremely important point here. You know, that we have to figure out. So anyway, all right, guys, listen. It's past 9. Thanks for the feedback. We'll just have ongoing conversation today. Why don't you guys just take a look at that, read it over, you know, and again, we'll just take some time in our meetings to keep discussing it and see what we want to do. All right, so moving on. So we have a request from the Assistant Town Clerk to approve the poll workers for the state election on Tuesday, November 6th.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do that.
Get to that one,
A few
right?
hours, isn't it?
We're gonna get to this one.
So someone hurry up, make a motion.
So I move that we appoint the poll workers presented to us on this sheet. There it is. I don't need to name them all, do I?
As presented?
As presented.
As presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have any further discussion on this? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks to everybody who was helping at the polls tomorrow. We certainly appreciate it.
Right, and especially all you that spent your time on early voting, which I think we had almost 800 people.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a good turnout. So we have a request from the Recreational Field Study Committee to appoint Peter Burns, term to expire June 30th, 2019. I want to read the email that I got as not so much what I just said, but also as an update, from this board as well. The board really just started getting together not too long ago, maybe a month or two ago, from what I understand. But the email reads, Recreational Fields Study Committee would like to request the appointment of Peter Burns to our 5-member committee. Peter is a member of the Open Space Committee as well as the CPC, has many years of experience with the GAA, is familiar with the West Street Fields. Peter is also uniquely familiar with the ongoing recreational trails linkage and analysis study being conducted by the Open Space Committee. The RFSC members were very happy to hear Peter was interested in supporting our efforts. Peter's appointment would round out our full committee as follows: Scott McDonald, Jeff Moore, David Surface, Harry Lacatilia, and Peter Burns. As a further update, the committee has refined the engineering scope of work and approved a revised proposal from Gale Associates. Gale is being engaged this month, and we plan to have their representatives lead an engineering kickoff session at our next regularly scheduled meeting the evening of November 26th. We are also pleased to have the support of Rich Williams and Peter Durkee, who have both volunteered to work with the RFSC in unofficial roles. So that's a good update from them, but we do have that request, so if I can hear a motion. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I have some discussion on the letter?
Sure.
Mike, isn't Gail the ones that have been doing what?
Yeah.
I'm mentioning Gail. They're the ones that
Yeah.
we've been having some trouble with, and so do you think, does this come in front of us at all? Because, they report to us, this board?
I think eventually they would.
Well, I don't have a copy of the letter.
At the bottom, Mike.
Sounds like they've already commissioned them.
Yeah, I think they have already.
What's the issues that we have? I have an issue.
Mike has said that they seem to repeatedly underestimate
Oh,
the
right,
estimates.
right. East Main Street, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
We talked a little bit about this last week when we
Right.
updated you
Yeah,
on
yeah.
where we were on West Main
That's a
Street.
good point.
Oh, maybe I have to pull it up on this request.
Just, I have to put a multiplier on the rest of it.
I think it's just for Mike, if you could just double check on where they are with that, and if we can just, see if there's,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how they went about engaging them. They didn't go through purchasing procedures, that's for sure.
So is that something you want to get in touch with them about?
Yeah, I'd like to know who hired them. I mean, this board has to sign the contract,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
so.
Nice, so you might want to
It's the first
there's a number of guys there you can reach out to.
First I've heard of this.
I mean, you got,
Well, thank you for being here tonight, Mike.
so Jeff or Scott, are your co-chairs, so I'm sure.
Adding to the board,
Yeah, they're adding a person to the board.
did we specify the number?
They were gonna be 5.
Yeah.
What was the date on that now?
And it's still 5?
June 30, 2019?
Of the letter?
Oh,
voted
with a vacancy.
No, the
Yes.
appointment.
Okay.
Yep.
There's 4 with a vacancy.
Yep. All right, so with that, any other questions before we, if someone can make a motion?
Oh, I had, okay, well, I move that, I don't know.
Yeah, for Peter.
Just to point, Peter.
Peter till June 30,
Okay, so I move to
2019.
appoint, the Board of Selectmen appoint Peter Burns to the Recreational Fields Study Committee. Is there an ending date on that?
June 30, 2019.
To term to expire June 30, 2019.
Second.
Okay, motion is second, any further discussion?
Yes.
Yep.
I think that they should talk with Mr. Coughlin, who identified several pieces of land, vacant land in the town that were 5 acres and above, right?
For septic?
Yeah. But it was just vacant land.
Yeah, oh, yeah. I mean,
Maybe they
absolutely,
could-
they should.
You know, glean some information from that to help them out.
It's a good suggestion.
Yeah, it's
That
a
was
good
all.
suggestion. I could, if it's the pleasure of the board, I could ask town planner to send them a copy of that information.
Sure.
Sure, that works.
Okay with that? Okay. Awesome.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, and, Peter, thank you for joining the board. Thank you for your time. So, to the top, general session approval of minutes, October 29, 2018. Does anybody have anything that they want to point out?
I didn't notice anything.
What were you on now, Mr. Chair? I'm sorry.
At the top, general session minutes of
Oh.
October 29.
Yeah, no, I looked them over. I read that over. I didn't, all looked okay to me.
Yep, everything okay?
Yeah, it looks fine to me. I didn't see anything.
Okay. All right.
You should find something.
I know, that's why I asked. All right, can I hear a motion then, please?
I
I
have
move that the Board of Selectmen approve the general session meeting minutes from October 29th, 2018 as presented.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So we have notice from Sarah Cagnata, the Library Director, on the retirement of Claire Spirito, Senior Library Technician. So we certainly want to thank Claire for her time. I also have a letter here, though, that I'd like to read, only because there's some specific information here that I'd like to set forth, but if I can find it. Here we go.
I also did.
Oh, there's a proclamation? Oh,
for-
fantastic.
And one for Veterans Day when you get to that.
All right.
Is that in there?
It's underneath it.
Oh,
Okay. So I can read this here? Okay. Whereas Claire Spirito is retiring as Senior Library Technician of Georgetown PB Library after 35 years of service. And whereas through her dedication in said position, she worked through the 2007 library renovation and expansion project. And whereas Claire Spirito has worked to promote the library for future generations. And whereas the town of Georgetown is extremely proud of and grateful to Claire Spirito and her dedicated service to the town. Now, therefore, we, Joseph Bonavita, Chair, Gary C. Fowler, Douglas W. Dawes, Stephen Sadler, and Charles Durney, Selectmen of the town of Georgetown, do hereby call upon all citizens to honor Claire Spirito, who has worked so hard to realize such great achievements. In witness hereof, we have caused to be affixed the official seal of the town of Georgetown this 5th day of November 2018. Claire, thank you very much for all of your efforts. And we'll have this for you. But I still want to read this, if I may, from Sarah. After 35 years of outstanding service and dedication, Claire Spirito, our Senior Library Technician at the Circulation Desk, will be retiring. We welcome the Georgetown community to join us on Friday, November 16th at the library to congratulate Claire and wish her well on the next chapter in her life. Cake and refreshments will be served from 12 to 2. A key part of our staff, Claire embodies the heart and soul of Georgetown Peabody Library and is a welcome and familiar face to all who visit. Every day, Claire's smile and wit makes our patrons feel welcome, and her natural, cheerful way of helping puts everyone at ease when visiting the library. Claire is the voice behind the phone call, the one who knows not only your name, but your library card number, and is willing to teach you a fun way to remember it. She's the epitome of calm in our occasionally hectic library and is always ready to listen, to make you laugh, to suggest the next great nonfiction read, and keep you connected to what's happening in the Georgetown community. The GPL staff will greatly miss working alongside her, but wish Claire the very best and look forward to seeing her often. Sincerely, Sarah Cognado.
Nice.
All right, thank you.
You guys gotta sign that too.
Okay.
That's for.
Oh, this was Sunday. Okay, so moving on. Actually, the next one is for our Veterans Day observance. Doug, if you want to take this on and just kind of notify what's going on.
Well, I'll just read the letter.
Yep.
Dear Georgetown residents and Board of Selectmen, the Georgetown Renee J. Gagnon American Legion Post number 211 and the Veterans of Foreign Wars Post number 7608 invite all residents of Georgetown to participate with us in the 2018 Veterans Day observance to be held on Sunday, November 11th, 2018 at 11 a.m. at Harry Murch Veterans Park. Both posts will be assembling at the Georgetown Park and Ride at 10:40 a.m. After assembling, we will march to Harry Murch Park, perform our ceremonies at 11 a.m. sharp, and then back to the Park and Ride. In case of inclement weather, the Veterans Day ceremony will be held at the Georgetown Fire Department on Central Street. Following the ceremony, coffee and donuts will be served for all in attendance at the Georgetown VFW Post 7608 located at 435 Andover Street. On behalf of the Georgetown Renee J. Gagnon American Legion Post 211 and Georgetown VFW Post 7608, sincerely, Douglas W. Dawes, American Legion Commander. I might also note that the American Legion Poppy Drive will be Saturday, November 10th from 8 to 12 at various locations in town. But we do invite you all to attend, and especially all veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Okay, so that pretty much concludes our agenda. Mike, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No.
No? Thanks, Mike. Anybody else? Anybody else? Go once, twice. No. All right. If there's nothing else, I want to thank everybody at home for joining us tonight. I certainly appreciate it. Our next meeting is Monday, November 19th, 2018 at 7 o'clock. So with that, I want to wish everyone good night.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, gee, I always forget that. Sorry. Thought we did that already.
No.
All right, go ahead. Someone.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Good night. Guys, have a night.